All right, time for the Week 2 Best Bets. I busted out my good luck backdrop this week, so maybe it'll help us out. 4 games I decided on after much deliberation. I really thought this was a tricky week. Talked myself into a couple of these games, talked myself out of several others. There were quite a few games on the slate that seemed obvious the public was heavy on one side. It was tough to make a case for the other side. Anyway, just felt like a minefield to me with these 16 games here this week. Did pick out 4 that we hope are winners, though. Let's start in Tennessee, where the Dallas Cowboys come to town to take on the Titans. Tennessee a 3-point favorite on BETDAQ. This line has been Tennessee minus 3.5 throughout most of the week, but again, it has settled at Tennessee minus 3. And I like the Cowboys here. Wouldn't be surprised if Dallas came to town and pulled the upset. Now, I certainly understand if you don't have much confidence in Dallas after what we saw last week. They looked bad in that Week 1 loss to San Francisco. However, it was Week 1, and what we see a lot of times coming out of Week 1 is overreactions. People take what they saw in Week 1 and they assume that's what they're going to see for the rest of the season, and we know based on past years that's just not the case. And I do believe this line here is a case of overreaction. Tennessee looked so good, they surprised everybody on the road in Kansas City, blowing out the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 1, and as we said, Dallas did not look very good at home against San Francisco. But keep in mind, Tony Romo was rusty coming back from that back surgery, the offseason back surgery. I believe Romo will be better in this game. He certainly has some great weapons at his disposal. Running back DeMarco Murray, was probably Dallas's lone bright spot last week. He'll look to build on that momentum this week. Of course, Dez Bryant is one of the league's very best wide receivers. Jason Witten, one of the NFL's best tight ends, had a very quiet game last week. I look for him to make his presence known in this game. Listen, I just don't think Tennessee is quite as good as people are saying they are right now. The Kansas City Chiefs really had a tough game last week. Alex Smith with 3 interceptions. Kansas City was without their best wide receiver in Dwayne Bowe, very limited on offense. Dallas, much more offensive weaponry, much more ways to attack this Tennessee defense. And I'm just not a believer in Jake Locker yet. I know Dallas does not have a particularly good defense, and that's putting it kindly. But you look at this Tennessee offense, Jake Locker, not much weaponry surrounding Jake Locker. I know Kendall Wright is a quality wide receiver, but I think Dallas has the edge in skill position talent here. I do like Tony Romo more than I like Jake Locker. I know this game is in Tennessee, but I think Dallas is going to be better this season. I think we're going to start to see that this week. Wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys went into town, picked up a victory over the Titans. And the 3 points could come in handy here. I think this might be a close game, so I like Dallas 3.5 a little more. But 3 points still, I think that might be a useful line there. So Dallas plus 3, my recommendation there. Next game I'd like to talk about, Cincinnati at home facing the Atlanta Falcons. This one of the best games of this Week 2 Sunday. Cincinnati a 5.5 point favorite on BETDAQ. This line was Cincinnati minus 5 throughout most of the week. It's now crept to 5.5. I still like the Bengals to cover. I think this is another one of those cases where we look at Week 1 and we might be overreacting a little bit. Everybody loved what they saw out of the Atlanta Falcons when they upset the New Orleans Saints. How can you not like what you saw out of Matt Ryan and that offense, putting up 37 points and nearly 600 total yards of offense on a Saints defense that finished 4th in the league in both yards allowed and points allowed in 2013. But keep in mind, that Saints defense, even though they played very well last season, in 2012, they allowed more yards than any team in the history of the NFL. So remains to be seen what kind of defense New Orleans is going to have this year. We know what kind of defense Cincinnati has. 3rd in the NFL in total defense last season. They went on the road and held Baltimore to 16 points in Week 1. This is one of the NFL's best defenses. And the Bengals, so good at home. They're especially good on offense at home. You always think about the Bengals being a defense-first team, but you look at what they've done recently at home on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, this is a team that has topped 40 points in 3 of their last 4 regular season home games. Andy Dalton, a bit of a weak link generally in Cincinnati, at least that's the way I view him, but he plays much better at home, and he'll have every opportunity for success against this Atlanta defense. It's, let's face it, is not very good. The Falcons, terrible on the defensive side of the ball last year. They sure didn't put up much of a fight in Week 1. Saints went up and down the field, putting up 34 points and nearly 500 yards of offense on this Atlanta defense. I think this is a tough spot for the Falcons on the road in Cincinnati. The Bengals 9-1 against the spread their last 10 home games. They are so good at home. I think we have an opportunity here to back the Bengals, a very reasonable 5.5-point number, because of the success Atlanta had last week against the New Orleans Saints. So great opportunity here. I like Cincinnati minus 5.5. Think they're going to beat Atlanta comfortably. Next game I'd like to talk about is out in San Diego, and this is one that, yes, I've talked myself into over the course of the week. We'll see if it pays me off today or not. Seattle, a 5-point road favorite in San Diego. I am betting against the Seahawks here. I like the Chargers plus 5. Listen, obviously tough to bet against the Seahawks right now after what we've seen out of them recently. Crushing Denver in last season's Super Bowl, and then looking like the same team steamrolling Green Bay in Week 1. But keep in mind, that game was in Seattle. We know these Seahawks under Pete Carroll, they play much better at home than they do on the road. You know, people have forgotten about the Seahawks' struggles on the road now that they've won the Super Bowl and look so dominant in Week 1 against Green Bay. But even last season, when the Seahawks were the best team in the NFL, they lost twice on the road. They won 3 other road games by 6 points or less. This team is not the same away from home as they are in Seattle. Very conservative on offense. We know Seattle, a run-first offense. That might play right into the hands of the San Diego defense, which is much better up front than they are in the secondary. Just not sure Seattle is going to spread it out and throw the ball all over the place and take advantage of the main weakness of the Chargers defense, which is the secondary. And you look on the other side of the ball, Phillip Rivers, certainly one of the NFL's best quarterbacks. San Diego, 5th in the league in total offense last season. Look, I know Seattle has the NFL's best defense. I do not expect the Chargers to go up and down the field and score 30 points in this game. But I think they'll score enough to keep it interesting. Wouldn't shock me if San Diego pulled out a win in this situation, though I do still expect Seattle to get the victory. But I think 5 points, too many here. I think San Diego plus 5, a good-looking bet. The public all over the Seattle Seahawks. And like we said, it's tough to blame them after what we've seen out of that team recently. But this wave of public love that Seattle is currently experiencing, justified public love after their recent performances, listen, it's bound to make the Seahawks overvalued at some point. They're not going to win and cover every game this week. I'm betting that some point is this week. I'm betting Seattle slightly overvalued as a 5-point road favorite, and San Diego will keep it close. I like the Chargers plus 5. Last game I'd like to talk about here, I'm riding with the public on this one. Green Bay Packers at home facing the New York Jets. Green Bay now a 7.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. This line was Green Bay minus 8 throughout most of the week. Now Green Bay minus 7.5. I think the Packers are going to cover here. The New York Jets picked up a win last week against the Oakland Raiders. Amassed over 400 total yards of offense. Just don't have any faith, though, in that New York offense led by Geno Smith, who was just so bad last season, just turning the ball over every time you turned around. Seemed like every time you clicked it on a New York Jets game, Geno Smith was throwing an interception or getting sacked and fumbling the football. Green Bay, a hungry team right now after that poor Week 1 performance in Seattle. They've had 10 days to lick their wounds. We know all about this Green Bay offense, one of the most explosive units in the league. And even though the Jets have a good defense, the major weakness of this New York defense is the secondary, specifically the cornerback position. That is not a good thing when you're about to face Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, this high-flying Green Bay offense. I think Green Bay is going to exercise some demons this week. I don't think this is going to be anything like what we saw out of them in Week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks. I think Green Bay is going to top 30 points. Just don't think the Jets are going to be able to keep up in this game. I know Green Bay does not have a great defense, but I do think they're going to play better than they did in Week 1. As we said, Geno Smith, a turnover-prone, mistake-prone quarterback last season as a rookie. Wouldn't surprise me to see him cough the ball up a couple of times here in this game. I like Green Bay to cover the 7.5-point number. Now, the public is with me on this game, and it's always nerve-wracking to follow the public in sports betting. But the public's not always wrong after all, and I'm betting that they see this game in the right way. Again, I like Green Bay minus 7.5 against the New York Jets. There you have it. Those are my 4 bets for the week. I like the Dallas Cowboys plus 3 on the road in Tennessee. Cincinnati minus 5.5 at home against the Atlanta Falcons. San Diego plus 5 at home against the defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, and Green Bay at home, minus 7.5 points against the New York Jets. I wish you best of luck this week in whatever you decide to do, just so your interests don't conflict with my interests.